Hey guys, welcome to the video for literal equations. Our essential question is, how can equivalent representations help me become an efficient and effective problem solver? So we have a vocabulary word, which is literal equations. So literal equations, I am sure 100% of you have seen it before. Here's an example of one, and here's another example of one. So literal equations contain primarily just variables. Occasionally there will be numbers, but it's primarily just variables. So an equation that is made up of one or probably two or more variables. All right. So what does it mean to solve? So back in the very first set of notes when we talked about some vocabulary words, solve means to find the answer or to find the solution. We're going to add on that to a little bit because, well, if I gave you the formula V equals LWH, which is the volume formula for a rectangle, or if I gave you area equals base times height, which is the area formula for a rectangle and a square, what does it mean to solve? Well, if I asked you to solve for H, what do I want you to do? I want you to isolate H. So what does it mean to solve? It means that we want to isolate the given variable. Okay, how to solve both equations for x. So here we have two equations. One of them is a basic equation that we've kind of solved before, and the other one is a literal equation that involves two or more variables. So we have 5x plus 3 equals 8. So here the first step I would take would be to subtract 3 from both sides, because we are trying to get x by itself. So we have 5x equals 5. And then my next step here is I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides, and I have x equals 1. All right, now it was very important that we subtracted 3 at the very beginning. And why? Well, sometimes people, they make the mistake that you need to divide by 5 first. But remember, to solve equations, you are doing PEMDAS backwards. So you either add or subtract before you divide or multiply. Okay, now over here we have 5x plus y equals m. I'm still trying to isolate x. My goal is to still try to get 5x alone. So in order to do that, what would I do? Well, if I look over here, I took away 3. I took away the thing that could be added or subtracted that was near the x. So over here, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to subtract y from both sides. Now, my next question is, are m and y like terms? What's a like term? Well, a like term is something that has the same exact variable and the same exact exponents. But we don't know what m and y are, right? We don't know what these are, and they are not like terms because they're not the same variable or have the same exponents. So you just write it as is, m minus y. Okay, now regardless of whatever this stuff over here looks like, you're still focused on this x here because you wanted to get it alone. And in order to get it alone, just like any other problem, you would divide by 5. Okay, and since we don't know what m or y are, we just kind of leave that as is. So x equals m minus y divided by 5. And that is our simplified answer. Now, it's not the prettiest answer, but that's our answer, right? We isolated the variable that it was asking us to. All right, moving on, we're going to solve the following equations for the given variable. So for these next few examples, there's going to be a variable inside the parentheses, and it'll ask you to solve that one, or to find that one. So here I have a equals L times W, and yes, this is a multiplication sign. Okay, I'm looking for W. So what am I going to do? Your first instinct might be to, oh, maybe I should subtract L. Maybe I should add L, divide L, whatever. You know that you have to get W by itself. So you're looking over here. Well, what operation is combining L and W together? Multiplication. So with equations, remember to get rid of something, we have to do the opposite operation. So since they're being multiplied together, I'm going to divide both sides by L. And I'll show you an example of what I mean. So if I had 4 equals 3W, how would I get W by itself? Well, you would divide both sides by 3. You're doing the same thing over here. Instead, there's actually variables. So if I were to just replace this, right, my 3 is now the L and the 4 is the A. Same thing. You're still trying to get the W by itself. So L divided by L. What is L divided by L? I don't know, but L divided by L is 1, right? Because 4 divided by 4 is 1, 1 divided by 1 is 1, 36 divided by 36 is 1. So anything divided by itself is always going to be 1. So these will cancel and become 1. And I have A divided by L equals W. Since A and L are not like terms, I have to leave it as is. And my W is by itself. All right, moving on to number 2. We have P equals 2L plus 2W. And if you haven't recognized, this is the formula for finding the area of perimeter of a rectangle. So they're wanting us to get L by itself. So let's look. We have P equals 2L plus 2W. We want to get L by itself. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 2W, right? So, for example, I've had 8 equals 2L plus 5. How would you get L by itself? Well, you would begin by subtracting 5. So I'm going to subtract that term over there. So that goes away, and now I have that. So I have P minus 2W. Again, they're not like terms, so you write them separately. P minus 2W equals 2L. Again, you're focusing on that variable that you're trying to isolate. I'm trying to isolate this L over here, and a 2 is attached. It's 2 times L, so I would do the opposite by dividing 2 out on both sides. And you divide 2 by everything. Okay, so 2 divided by 2 is 1, and so now I have P minus 2W divided by 2 equals L. And you're like, wow, I'm done. L is all by itself. Not quite. So you always want to check to see if it's simplified the most. So I'm going to go over here and write something really quick for you. Let me ask you, what does this equal? What's 1 plus 2 divided by 4 equal? Well, that equals 3/4, right? This is something that we learn very young, like in elementary, middle school. Well, if I split it up with the same denominator, right? If I said 1/4 plus 2/4, what is that? It's still 3/4. What was the only difference? Well, in the first one, they're together, and in the second one, they're separate, but they have the same denominator. So we're going to do the same concept over here. Here we're going to split this up. So we have P divided by 2 minus 2W divided by 2. We're going to split those two up. Same denominator, but you're splitting the numerator up. You're only allowed to do it by splitting the numerator. You should always have the same denominator. So you should never have denominators that are different values. And then you ask yourself one more time, can I simplify anything further? And you're like, yes, I can. 2 divided by 2 is 1. If 2 divided by 2 is 1, then I just have P divided by 2 minus W equals L, because these will cancel, right? And that is my simplified form. So that one was a little bit of work. That is one that we tend to struggle with. Anytime where you split up the fraction, it is kind of a hassle, and sometimes we make little mistakes like that. All right, number 3, 2x plus y equals 7. And I'm being asked to isolate y. So over here, the first thing I would do is I would subtract the term 2x on both sides because I want to get y alone. Y equals 7 minus 2x. Okay, well, is y by itself? Yep, so I'm done. That's it. So sometimes it just takes one step, and sometimes it takes like 500. So it just depends on the problem. All right, number 4. This is a big one. You're actually going to see stuff like this all the time in Unit 3, so please, please, please be comfortable with this one and practice with this one a lot because it is a lot of thinking. There's room for errors everywhere, so just be very careful. All right, so y. I want to get y by itself, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 3x on both sides. So I have negative 2y equals 6 minus 3x. The next step here, again, you're just looking at the variable you need to isolate. And the variable I need to isolate is my y. So I'm going to divide everything by negative 2. Everything. So then I have y equals 6 minus 3x divided by negative 2. Well, you're like, oh, wait, my numerator can be split up into 2. So I'm going to go ahead and split those up. Y equals 6 divided by negative 2. Whoops. 6 divided by negative 2. And then I have minus 3x over negative 2. So I have everything the exact same. I just split up the numerator. Next step is to see, can I simplify anything? Yes, I can. 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. And then over here, you're like, well, 3 divided by 2 doesn't simplify. That's as simple as it gets. However, there are 2 negative signs. And 2 negative signs, if I divide them, it makes a positive. So that would be plus 3 over 2. Okay, that's a big, big, big mistake people make in Unit 3. Huge. They forget that there's two negatives there and becomes a positive. So that is a big issue. Another way you could write this is y equals negative 3 plus 3 over 2x, right? So you can actually take the x and move it outside of the improper fraction. So let me actually, I'll show you what I mean. So sometimes we write like 1/2 x, but that's the same thing as x divided by 2, right? We're taking x and multiplying it by half, or taking x and taking half out of it, so same thing. So that's kind of like what I did here. So this way would be over here, and then this way would be over there. But again, I'm just showing you whichever way you would like to write it. We will be writing it in the way that I boxed in blue in Unit 3 a lot. So if you want to get used to writing it that way, you may. All right, number 5 is also a special one. So we have V equals LWH, and if you haven't noticed, this is the volume formula, so this is the one that I brought up at the very beginning. We're asked to isolate H. So the operation that's happening between these three variables here is all multiplication, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and give you an example with regular real numbers. So let's say I had 24, 2 times 4 times 3. So the length was 2, the width was 4, and the height was 3. And you don't have to write this, but I do want you to watch. And if you're not taking notes, you're wrong, so please be taking notes. So 2 times 4 times 3 does equal 24. Let me say that I wanted you to get H by itself, or 3 by itself. How would I get 3 by itself? Well, I would divide both sides by 2 and get rid of that 2, right? So then 24 divided by 2 is 12, and then I have 4 times 3. Still true, right? And then I still want to get 3 by itself. Well, how would I get 3 by itself? I would divide by 4 on both sides. And I have 3 equals 3, which is true. So that was 2 steps. But couldn't I have just done this? Couldn't I have just divided by 2 times 4, 2 things at the same time? Because I divided by 2, and then I had to divide by 4. So let's see if we can divide both things out at the same time. So let's divide out 2 times 4 at the same time. So the 2's will cancel, and the 4's will cancel, and all I have left is a 3. And then 24 divided by 2 times 4, which is 8, is 3. So it does work. So we are going to divide this one. We're going to get H by itself, but instead of dividing by just L or by W or doing one after the other, we're going to divide them both at the same exact time. And we can do that because it's all multiplication going on. So L's will cancel and the W's cancel. So I have V over LW equals H. And H is all by itself, and we did that all in one step. Now, if you need to do 2 steps, go ahead. There's no pressure for you to feel like you have to do everything in one step. All right, number 6. So this one is a little tricky. We're asked to find H, but H is in the denominator, so we have an issue here. We don't like fractions, so we're going to have to change something. And in order to get H out of the denominator, we're going to have to multiply everything by the denominator, which is H. So I'm going to multiply both sides by H. Okay, well, H over here will cancel, because this is technically H over 1, so those will cancel. And then on the left, I have H times G equals 2. Well, I still want H by itself, so I need to divide both sides by G. And that is my final answer. So in this one, it was kind of weird because normally we're trying to get something by itself, so we're not even touching it. We're moving everything around it. In this case, we had to because it was in the denominator. So if the variable you're looking for is in the denominator, you need to try to get rid of that denominator by multiplying it on both sides. All right, number 5. M divided by A equals P minus N, and we're asked to find A. Okay, same problem here. A is the variable we're looking for, but it's in the denominator, so we have an issue. So I need to multiply both sides by A, technically A over 1, right? And then we're going to multiply this side also by A. But am I multiplying the whole entire side by A or just the N? The whole entire side. So you have to put parentheses here. You're multiplying the entire side by A. So on the left, this cancels, and I have M equals P minus N times A. Now, I need to get A alone, but I have something attached to it. I have the P minus N. Notice how it's in parentheses. This is in parentheses. The parentheses are like a house. Everybody in that house. So you can actually take away the entire house, but you have to take it all at once. You can't move out and leave your sibling in the house, right? So you need to divide out the entire house. So since P minus N is being multiplied by A, I can divide it all by P minus N. right? So this is similar to saying, like, if I had 5a and I want a by itself, I would divide everything by 5 to get the a alone and get m over 5. Same thing over here. Since it's all in a house, it's all compact into one thing, I can divide it on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by the p minus n. So this will cancel, and I have m over p minus n equals a. So same concept as the blue, except in this case we have a giant set of parentheses instead of just a single term. All right, number 6. This is something that you will see in Unit 3. This is actually the standard form of a linear equation. We'll learn that later. So we have ax plus by equals c, and we're asked to find x. Okay, so let's do this. We need to find x. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract by. Ax equals c minus by. I'm still asked to find x alone, right? So I know a is being multiplied to x, so I'm going to divide a out. So a's will cancel because that's 1. I have x equals c minus by all over a. And I do have a fraction here, so safe bet is just to always split it up. Remember from, which problem was it? Number 2, so we had to split that up because there were 2 items in the numerator, so we would split it up. So we're going to do the same thing here. We have x equals c divided by a minus by divided by a. Okay, now there are no like terms. There's no numbers that I could divide out easily, nothing. So this would actually be my final answer, but you could have even left it in that form. So it doesn't really matter, but if you want to be safe, you can always just split it up. It's not wrong technically, so all good. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but I am going to go over number 7, which is the pre-P problem. I'm asked to find B2. So this is actually the formula to find the area of a trapezoid, I believe. So we're asked to isolate B2, which stands for base 2. So in this case, I need to isolate the B2. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of those fractions. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 over 1, or just 2. So multiply that side by 2, 2. So these 2's will cancel, and I'll have 2a equals h times b1 plus b2. All right, and now we're still trying to get b2 by itself. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to divide something out. So I know h is being multiplied to b1 plus b2. So I'm going to divide the h out. So I have 2a divided by h equals base 1 plus base 2. And the parentheses go away because nothing else is being multiplied to it. And then my last step here is to subtract b1 on both sides so that I can have b2 by itself. Now, it's going to go next to it because it's not being divided. It's not going under that division bar. And this would be my final answer. So you're getting B2 all by itself. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment for tutorials. Other than that, that is the end of the video.